So essentially, with the warmongering in D.C., even Biden is joining in on the warmongering in D.C., promising to uphold the neo-Nazi government of the Ukraine by any means necessary against the forces of Russia. I would like to ask, is this really a new thing, or is this just the Israeli-Arab conflict with more snow and sexier women? Many people don't understand this. Same thing with the Israeli-Arab conflict, and actually more so even, because the Israeli-Arab conflict is relatively new. I mean, Jews have lived in peace with their Muslim neighbors until the creation of Israel, until Zionism. But with the Kievian Rus, okay, people don't know who the Kievian Rus are. The Kievian Rus are the people, they're all genetically the same group of people, the same tribe of people that make up Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. So Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia are all biologically the same country as far as the indigenous inhabitants are concerned. They are the Kievian Rus. They got very nice women. Some of them look just like Barbie dolls. Don't believe me? Google it. But my point is that this conflict between the Ukrainians and the Russians has been going on for over 1,000 years. And what's really ridiculous about it is, as the conflict in the Middle East is dying down, even though I highly disagree with why it's dying down, which was the Trump support of the one-state solution, which means Israel gets everything. I don't agree with that. But morally, I think it's reprehensible the way that the Israelis have treated the Palestinian people, and I'll get more into that later in the video, because this is not a video about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, so much as it's a video about the United States being absolutely moronic when it comes to picking sides of conflicts around the world, when we don't even have our own shit straight in this country. Okay, and I'm going to get into that later too. But essentially, the Kievian Rus are the people, the indigenous people of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. They are the same people. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, somewhat Nordic-looking, a little thicker. We all know what I'm not a Scandinavian. We all know what a Slavic person looks like, a lighter-skinned Slavic person. Not a Dinari. I'm talking about a Russian, a Belarusian. By Russian, I mean Ukrainian, Russian, or Belarusian. They're all the same thing. Now, Victoria Nuland, I believe it was under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, used U.S. taxpayer money to fund a neo-Nazi uprising, and was brought before Congress about this, to fund a neo-Nazi uprising in the Ukraine, to overthrow the democratically elected government of the Ukraine, because, why? Because the democratically elected government of the Ukraine was more favorable toward Russia than the EU, is essentially what was going on. And then there was this thing called Maidan, or Maidan. And there was a woman, Natalia Poklanskaya, who was the head prosecutor of the Ukraine. The Japanese call her Prosecutie, and they make all sorts of anime about her. But if you watch the interviews with the English subtitles and she goes through what happened, this is a woman that had an attempt made on her, numerous attempts made on her life, had a bullet whiz past her head, and didn't even shit her pants, much like Joe Biden probably does on a daily basis. My point is that the problems between the Russians and the Ukrainians do not involve the Americans unless the Americans involve ourselves in that problem. The problem is The average American citizen does not have a say in whether or not we become involved in a conflict that has nothing to do with the American people. That's the problem. Now, what people don't understand, there was a gentleman that pointed out how Putin is friendly with Israel and stuff in my comment section. I'm not your typical moron when it comes to Vladimir Putin. I have a great deal of respect for Vladimir Putin, mostly as a martial artist. I'm sure people know by now, but Putin is a very prominent judoka, meaning a practitioner of judo. I think he's amazing in that respect. Where Putin deserves a lot of respect is that he is very Machiavellian. He went and built a system, a governmental system, where he has basically reclaimed a lot of the governmental power, the centralization that was under the USSR in many ways, while retaining it not being communist. He's a political genius. He's a Machiavellian genius. And according to racial lines, this is what a lot of people like to point out, that his mother was Jewish. I don't know for sure if she was or wasn't. It's iffy, either or. I don't care if Vladimir Putin is a black guy from the middle of the Congo. He's a genius. He's a Machiavellian genius. As far as racial issues go, my views on those have really matured quite a bit. I don't give a crap about Europe, because Europe doesn't give a crap about Europe. This is the thing that really has irked me about white advocates, white civil rights advocates in the United States. They're concerned about our alleged brothers and sisters in England and in France and in all these parts of the world and, all throughout Europe. Europe doesn't care about Europe. Europe is disgustingly liberal. Europe is responsible for Europe's problems. Okay? Where we have brothers and sisters is in our fellow formerly colonial powers, like South Africa, where white people are hunted like animals by the blacks in South Africa, and that's happening here too. That's where, and Australia, I see camaraderie with our former colonial powers. Okay, but I also see a need to think regionally, and I think that it's America really needs to pay attention to the Americas, pay attention to this region. From Greenland to Argentina. That is what the United States has to pay attention to. What people don't understand is there are many South American countries, I believe, I don't have the numbers, I don't think, but I might look for them and put them in the description. 33% of Latin America is white. Okay? So all these people want to preoccupy themselves with Europe, Fortress Europa and all this crap. Look at Europe. Look at Europe. Okay? Buenos Aires looks more like Paris than Paris does. Okay? That's the truth. Okay? So think about that. The other thing is, as far as I'm concerned, the United States has no business involving itself in any conflicts until we figure out our own problems. What do I mean by that? I've made videos about gang activity in the United States military, okay, which is a reality, unfortunately. Another reality is the fact that many of our inner cities, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago, Detroit, are more dangerous than third world Latin American countries, like Nicaragua, like Chile, okay? So our cities in the United States, and I'm going to leave links to in the description about this, are less safe than third world countries in Latin America. The same third world countries that Senor Biden wants to bring in all these millions of refugees from. Well, where are we going to put these millions of refugees? In our cities that are less safe? Then, there's more violent crime in the country, in the cities, than in the countries that these people are fleeing because of the violence. I mean, it's mind-bogglingly retarded that they can't wrap their head around the fact that the first thing that we need to do before we even think about taking care of anybody else is take care of the problems in this country. Chief among them is the violence in the inner cities and the gang activity in the military, which cripples our military's effective deployment domestically to deal with anything, or in a foreign sense. You don't want to be known as the country that's exporting gang violence to relatively peaceful parts of the world. When I went to school for criminal justice in 2004 or 2003, I think it was, statistically speaking, Baghdad, the city of Baghdad, which was at the time occupied by U.S. military and was an active war zone, statistically was safer than Philadelphia. Okay? Does that give a hint as to the problems facing this country and the necessity to do something about the problems facing this country instead of worrying about a thousands and thousands of years old conflict between one group of Kievian Rus and another group of Kievian Rus that does not involve me or you or anyone else in the United States? It's not a problem that concerns the United States any more than the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was. And people might call me a hypocrite because I've made videos in favor of Palestinian liberation. Frankly speaking, I don't really care whether Palestine is liberated or not. What I do think is I think that the treatment of the Palestinians is morally reprehensible and uncalled for. And anybody that tries to compare what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians to what the Anglo-Americans did to the Native Americans is absolutely ridiculous. I've made numerous videos about how the Anglo-Americans still take care of the Native Americans. We didn't slaughter them like maniacs, okay? But the fact of the matter, what was funny is the other day, I sent a friend of mine that happens to be Jewish a joke from the Onion. That says that an IDF soldier was celebrating or whatever, bragging about heroically killing an 8-month-old. These are the things that take place in Israel. Now that's satire. That's satire. That's the Onion. But at this point in time, it's hard to tell satire from the news. It's getting that bad. My point about the Israeli-Palestinian or Israeli-Arab conflict is it should not involve United States forces, United States money, United States weapons, or United States involvement. That's my opinion, always been my opinion. I do think that Americans should have the right to boycott Israel. Now let's get to that. Let's get to Ilhan Omar. Now, I brought up how Victoria Nuland was brought before Congress for funding a Nazi takeover of a democratically elected country, the leadership of a democratically elected leadership of a country, which will be in the description. But what people are not talking about is the fact that a U.S. citizen and U.S. representative, Ms. Ilhan Omar, okay, who, whether you agree with it or not, is a U.S. citizen and works as a U.S. representative, was bullied into not telling the truth due to an alleged anti-Semitic comment. What was the anti-Semitic comment? It's all about the Benjamins. And she explained how AIPAC, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, lobbying groups in the United States, lobbies for Israel. Imagine that. Imagine the fact that a U.S. citizen and congressperson is being censored by our government and can't say, which is not a lie, that an Israeli lobbying firm lobbies for Israel. That's not a lie. It's not an untruth. It's not a half-truth. It's the truth. It's not anything out of whack. It's the truth. But that's the kind of world we live in now. Now, the thing is with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict about that satire about how the IDF soldier was talking about heroically murdering an 8-month-old, my friend actually seems to have taken that offensively, or did not know it was satire, one or the other. This is one of the funnier things about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is that for whatever reason, Jewish people think that they must support Israel even if they know that it's morally reprehensible. Even if they agree that it's immoral, they have this urge to support it. And this goes to Zionism and the Zionist takeover of Judaism. There is actually a group called True Torah Jews that is against Israel. Okay? And it really does get to the point where you have to wonder how many of these stupid, moronic, forever conflicts is the U.S. going to involve itself with. What I see unfolding with U.S. involvement in Russia is another forever conflict where the United States stupidly puts its own people and its own money at risk. I'm going to leave a link to an interview between Bill Maher and Michael Scheuer, who is a former CIA operative. And I agree with Mr. Scheuer in the sense that Israel is not worth one American penny or one American life. But Bill Maher, who is a very popular liberal, mind you, Bill Maher is also a very popular Zionist. Okay? Now, why is that ridiculous? Well, because who's running our country? Is our country being run by Americans, by U.S. citizens, or is it being run by foreigners? That's the question you need to ask. Another question is, why is Joe Biden so hot and bothered about bringing in Latin American refugees when our country is quickly becoming less safe than Latin America? That's another question. That's all for this video. Please follow the links in the description. Remember, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict is probably just another Israeli-Arab conflict with more snow and much, much, much more attractive women. I like them Slavic girls.